In the damp, grey light of October 14th, 1913, the village of Senghenydd was a place of rhythmic, industrial clockwork. 950 men and boys had just descended into the deep, dark veins of the Universal Colliery. They were the lifeblood of the British Empire, fueling the grandest navy the world had ever seen with the finest steam coal on Earth. But beneath their feet, a silent, invisible killer was gathering its breath. Within the hour, a roar louder than thunder would tear through the valley, and the clockwork of Senghenydd would stop forever. The air was still, but the earth was about to scream. The Universal Colliery was a marvel of the industrial age, a sprawling subterranean labyrinth reaching nearly 2,000 feet into the Welsh bedrock. By 1913, coal wasn't just fuel, it was the ultimate global currency, and the pressure to extract it was relentless. The mine had a dark history. 12 years prior, an explosion had claimed 81 lives, a warning from the deep that management had ostensibly heeded with new fans and safety protocols. Yet, as the morning shift began, the safety-first signs felt like hollow decorations to the men working in the West York timbering. They knew the mine was gassy, a term whispered in the pubs with a shudder, but in a town where the mine owned your house and your future, you didn't complain about the air until it was too late to breathe it. The machinery hummed, the cages dropped, and 950 souls vanished into the maw of the earth. At 8:10 a.m., the world split open. A massive explosion, likely triggered by a spark from electrical equipment, ignited a pocket of methane gas. This wasn't a singular event, it was a fuse. The initial blast stirred up decades of accumulated coal dust. Fine, dry, and more explosive than gunpowder, transforming the miles of tunnels into a high-pressure cannon. A wall of fire roared through the districts, incinerating everything in its path. On the surface, the massive iron cage at the mouth of the shaft, weighing several tons, was blown upward like a toy, while the headgear was twisted into a blackened skeleton. The townspeople rushed to their doorways, feeling the tremor in their bones, knowing exactly what that sound meant. The technical cause of the disaster centered on a profound mechanical blunder. The mine utilized an electrical signaling system to communicate between the coalface and the surface. In 1913, these systems were primitive. They consisted of bare wires that were touched together to complete a circuit and ring a bell. In a gassy mine, this was pure insanity. Despite knowing the mine was prone to methane leaks, the management had installed a system that was not spark-proof. On that October morning, a simple signal to move a coal dram likely created a microscopic spark. In an atmosphere thick with methane, that spark was all it took to initiate a sequence of events that would destroy the valley. As the smoke cleared, a horrifying realization set in. The fire was still burning deep in the earth. The ventilation fans, designed to pull fresh air in, were now feeding oxygen to an inferno. Rescue teams arrived from across the valley, but they were met by a wall of afterdamp, the lethal cocktail of carbon monoxide and nitrogen that is just as deadly as the fire itself. Men stood at the pit head, their faces etched with a desperate, silent hope, watching the rescue brigades disappear into the haze with primitive breathing apparatus. They were fighting for the lives of 900 men trapped behind a curtain of fire and poison. But the mine was a greedy beast, and it wasn't finished feeding. While the technical failure was a matter of sparks and wires, the social failure was measured in blood and grief. Senghenydd was a company town in the truest, most suffocating sense of the word. The Universal Colliery didn't just employ the men. It owned the houses they slept in, the stores they bought food from, and the very air they breathed. When the explosion ripped through the shafts, it didn't just kill individuals, it decapitated the social structure of the entire community. In a single morning, Senghenydd became a town of ghosts. The scale of the loss was so concentrated that it defied comprehension. There were streets, like High Street and Commercial Street, where almost every single house lost a man or a boy. In some households, 3 generations were wiped out in an instant. A grandfather, a father, and a 14-year-old son, all working the same seam. The local economy, built entirely on the backs of these men, collapsed. Widowed mothers were suddenly faced with the terrifying reality that they had no income, and because the houses were tied to the colliery, they faced immediate eviction. The psychological trauma was a slow-acting poison. For weeks, the main activity in the village was the endless procession of horse-drawn hearses. The funerals were silent affairs. There were no bands playing, just the rhythmic crunch of boots on gravel and the sound of children crying. The disaster created over 200 widows and more than 400 fatherless children in a single day. The Senghenydd orphans represent a bleak chapter in Welsh history. Children who would never know their fathers because a coal company saved a few pounds on spark-proof bells. To reach the dark heart of the Senghenydd catastrophe, we must look at the culture of production at all costs. The Universal Colliery was owned by the Lewis Merthyr Consolidated Collieries Limited, chaired by Lord Merthyr. This was an empire built on the extraction of wealth, and safety was often viewed as a friction against profit. The inquiry revealed that the mine's ventilation system was fundamentally flawed. When the explosion occurred, the air current carried the lethal afterdamp directly into the faces of the men who might have otherwise escaped. The fans were not reversible, a technological choice that condemned hundreds to suffocation. Coal dust was a known killer long before Senghenydd. By 1913, inspectors and mining experts had repeatedly warned that dry coal dust could turn a small ignition into a colliery-wide explosion. At Universal Colliery, dangerous accumulations were identified, yet dust control was inconsistent and limited. Watering focused on certain main roadways, while other areas, return airways, timbers, and working faces, remained dry and heavily dusted. After the blast, investigators found coal dust coating roofs, sides, and supports in hazardous quantities. The disaster didn't just happen because of a spark. It happened because the management had spent years building the fuel for that spark to ignite. The sheer scale of the Senghenydd tragedy meant that every single family in the Aber Valley was impacted. It wasn't just a loss of life, it was an erasure of the future. The relief fund set up for the families was a pittance compared to the massive profits the colliery owners had amassed. This systemic cruelty added a second layer of trauma to the physical loss of their husbands. The community was trapped. They lived in houses they couldn't afford, fueled by the memory of men the company had failed to protect, and overseen by a charity system that treated them with suspicion. While the colliery owners continued to live in their grand manners, the women of Senghenydd were left to scrub the coal dust from their doorsteps, a dust that had killed their loved ones, just to maintain a veneer of respectability. As the rescue brigades pushed deeper into the suffocating gloom of the West York district, the true horror of the systematic neglect was laid bare. This wasn't just a place of death, it was a museum of terror. They found men who had died in the act of trying to save their workmates. Figures frozen in time, hands outstretched toward the rubble. But for many, death had been a slow, agonizing creep. The carbon monoxide, or the White Death, had done its work with terrifying efficiency in the pockets of the mine where the fire hadn't reached. The rescuers often found groups of men huddled together, some with their jackets wrapped around their heads, having sat in the dark waiting for a rescue that would never come. These were men who had been alive for hours, perhaps days, after the initial blast, listening to the groaning of the earth above them. The lack of emergency equipment meant they were trapped. and they would never see their loved ones again. In the months following the disaster, the national press moved on to other stories of empire and impending world war. But in the valley, the silence remained. Without the man of the house, women were forced into back-breaking labor or relied on meager relief funds that were administered with a cold Victorian judgment. The community was left to carry the weight of a monumental blunder alone, while the men responsible continued to dine in the clubs of Cardiff and London. This industrial silence was perhaps the cruelest blunder of all. The colliery owners made no public apology. They expressed no regret for the lack of reversible fans or the bare wire signalling systems. Instead, they focused on getting the mine back into production as quickly as possible. Within months, coal was again being wound up from the same shafts where 439 bodies had been recovered. The message to the survivors was clear. The machinery of the empire was more important than the people who greased its gears. As the rescue efforts dragged into the second week, a grim truth emerged from the soot-stained ledgers of the Universal Colliery. It was revealed that the mine owners had been previously warned and even fined for failing to properly clear coal dust and for inadequate stone dusting. They had prioritized the winding of coal over the safety of the breath in a miner's lungs. But the most crushing discovery was that the emergency signaling equipment, the very thing meant to save lives, was likely the ignition source. The safety measures were the executioners, and the management had known the equipment was non-compliant for months. The final toll was staggering. 439 men and boys were killed, making it the worst mining disaster in British history. The investigation that followed was a masterclass in institutional coldness. The manager, Edward Shaw, was eventually prosecuted for 17 breaches of the Coal Mines Act, but the legal system protected the wealth behind the mine. The punishment for the management was a series of fines totaling just £24, roughly 5 pence per life lost. The public outrage was tectonic, a bitterness that would fuel the rise of labour unions and forever change the relationship between the worker and the machine. Senghenydd wasn't just a disaster, it was an industrial murder. The tragedy at Senghenydd was a catalyst for radical change in industrial law. From the ashes of the Universal Colliery, 5 critical lessons were etched into history. 1. Dust is a detonator. It was proven that coal dust was the primary factor in the scale of the disaster. This led to the mandatory use of stone dusting, where inert limestone dust is spread to neutralize flammable coal particles. 2. The folly of good enough. Management had ignored previous warnings because the mine remained profitable. This disaster ensured that safety regulations moved from suggestions to legally binding mandates with heavy criminal oversight. 3. How communication can kill. The faulty signaling bells led to the development of intrinsically safe electrical equipment. Today, all mining electronics must be designed so they cannot produce a spark powerful enough to ignite an atmosphere. 4. The importance of ventilation control. The disaster taught engineers that fans must be reversible. In fire, being able to reverse the airflow can keep smoke away from trapped men and provide a clean path for rescue. 5. The human cost of progress. The measly £24 fine triggered a massive shift in public perception. It helped create the modern concept of corporate manslaughter, ensuring that the lives of workers could no longer be dismissed as a mere line item in a budget. Senghenydd remains a scar on the Welsh landscape, a reminder of what happens when the pursuit of profit outpaces the value of human life. The hills are quiet now, the mines closed, and the slag heaps covered in grass. But if you stand in the valley on a quiet October morning, you can still feel the weight of those 439 souls. It is a story of a disaster that didn't have to happen, and a warning that the mistakes of the past are always waiting to be repeated.